At the age of 17, I underwent intense knee surgery to repair my meniscus because I trained under a coaching staff that was not properly trained on how to progress me in a safe manner. I ended up getting injured within a game because they did not prepare me properly. Now, as sad as it is to say, this is the case with a lot of athletes. Many athletes go under intense surgeries or horrible injuries because of underqualified coaches. Actually, the National Council for the Accreditation of Coaching Education released an article that said that 5 to 10% of all coaches in America are actually underqualified for their position, putting athletes at risk. So today we're going to talk about the dangers and the problem that is underqualified coaching. All right, so first we're going to talk about the mental and physical problems that come with underqualified coach. We're going to talk about how it's also a problem because underqualified coaches tend to prevent the success of these athletes to going on to bigger, greater things. Number two, we're going to talk about the causes of why so many coaches are underqualified, which is A, they're poorly qualified. There are poor qualifications to hiring a coach, and B, they undergo poor education and poor training programs due to the lack of qualifications. And then number three, we're going to talk about a solution that we can implement on the large scale and a solution that you can take immediately. Let's get started. So we're going to begin with the mental and physical detriment to the athlete, and then we're going to talk about how underqualified coaches actually prevent the chance at a better life for a lot of these youth athletes. So to begin, we're going to talk about the mental state. So according to the journal, a scholarly journal called BMJ Open Sport and Exercise Medicine, released on their journal on January 8, 2020, they mentioned that undertrained coaches, when dealing with a situation of an adolescent, actually most of their actions will negatively impact that student's mentality. So for example, if a kid loses a game, very common scenario, they come to their coach and say, help me. It's actually common for whatever the coach is going to say to make it worse for the student because they are undertrained. And that can lead to a number of different mental issues, as most significantly self-confidence problems in the future. Also, it can negatively impact them physically. As I mentioned with my meniscus, this is not uncommon. So actually most coaches don't know how to regress or progress the athlete because they're only given a general knowledge of the sport and not an in-depth knowledge about the body and how much it can take. Actually, the British Journal of Sport Medicine released a journal article on October 25th, 2019, which says that many coaches, it's a common mentality to teach their athletes to push through injury instead of coming back to go and healing it. So they'd send them out into the game with a pre-existing injury, and it makes it that much worse, which, by the way, is exactly what happened with my knee. Coaches did not know. Now, it's not their fault necessarily, but at the end of the day, I had to pay a lot of money just to get my knee fixed to walk like a normal person. All right? So that was the first detriment. Second, underqualified coaching can actually prevent the chance at a better life. Okay, so there was actually an article released by the Journal of Sports Media. This is a scholarly article released in spring 2019, and it talked about an athlete who grew up in a poor neighborhood of Scuba, and he said that football was his only chance at getting away from the ghetto, from his hood, from a lot of the dangers that were in his life, a lot of things that came from a low economic status, and the only way he can get out of it was football. And an underqualified coach who will harm him and who could have potentially prevented him from his only chance at escaping that life, that's a real problem. So now that we've learned about the physical and mental detriments as well as how it ruins a chance at a better life, now we're going to talk about why many coaches are underqualified. Okay, so first, they're underqualified because employers set the low bar and have a lack of qualifications for them to have it. And then B, due to those lack of qualifications, coaches don't seek additional training, and so most of them become poorly trained. Okay, so actually there's a journal article released in the Biomedical Research International and this was also released on July 11th, 2019, and it mentioned that PE coaches have a tendency to be hired even without qualifications, that there are actually quite a few PE coaches that have been hired without any qualifications, any education, just because they had some experience in the field. Now, that's on the fault of the employer, but that's why there's so many coaches who are underqualified. Okay? And then also, because they don't need qualifications, it leads to them wanting to get worse education. They have poor training. Okay, so the journal released by the Physical Culture and Sport on June 14, 2019, it said that a lot of formal education for coaches is based upon experience rather than a formal learning environment, such as most of our school system, which is proven to be effective. So if a method that's proven to be effective is not being employed within a very important subject, such as coaching education, that's why so many are underqualified. And often, when they try to expand, this is mentioned in the article, they try to expand the education, most of the time they meet barriers and they're limited in it because it's not placed at a high importance. So now that we've talked, now we know the causes of why these coaches are underqualified and why so many of them are underqualified, we're going to talk about a solution. So first we're going to talk about the large scale, which is the two-part certification process which we're going to put in place, all right? So we're going to offer a national certification that's going to take a holistic approach on both the physical, sports-specific, and mental training, where most national certifications nowadays only have certain elements of that. Actually, there are some pros who are already implementing this system. The National Soccer Coaches Association of America has started giving advanced training to 33,000 coaches. This was released in the Journal of Hospitality, Leisure, Sports, Tourism Education on November 21st, 2020. And you see, what this does is that it shows that national certifications work and people will pay for it, but it needs to be good and put out there, which is why we're talking about all three factors of coaching, all right? And then also, this is the second part, is that it needs to be required at all levels. This is high school, AYSO, youth athletes, college, professionals. There's actually coaches who already seek further education, and they travel to Switzerland to get the ICECP certification. This was released by the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education on November 7, 2020, where people actually do travel outside of the country into Switzerland in order to get their certification. So the need is there, people will do it, okay? And then finally, on a small scale, that's what we do on a large scale. On a small scale, what we can do is we can educate ourselves. So there's a website called the Parisi Certification, okay? Here's what the logo looks like right now. So what's going to happen is, if you're a coach, go to this website and seek a small scale certification. It will give you a holistic